All right, we are live now. Just going to wait for people to join. Looks like we've got people slowly joining. Welcome to Taste of Art this evening. Just going to wait another couple of minutes for people to get on, or a minute or so. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. I hope you're ready to taste some good beer tonight. All right. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. Christine, I'm going to introduce myself and some of the rules, and then I'll introduce you. So welcome to A Taste of Art. And tonight we are lucky to have Wasserhund Brewery and Christine Holley here with us tonight. Welcome, Christine. And just want to go over a couple of the rules. So for those of you who might be familiar, you already know these by heart. But you can go ahead and crack the first beer tonight if you want. We recommend that you use a clear glass when each beer is introduced. But if you want to, Christine said we could go ahead and start with the Purebred Pilsner. If you want to go ahead and, Christine made a really good point. People don't want to just sit here this whole time and not be cracking into that beer. So we're just going to go ahead and do that. Now you can see us, but we can't see you. So we cannot see you all pouring your beers, hopefully not spilling them. But anyway, you'll be able to see us, but we won't be able to see you. So we're going to ask you to pop your comments into the chat feature if you'd like to share anything, and that goes for the beer tasting as well as our art moments. And you can do that to just the panelists if you want to ask the question to just Christine or myself, or if you want to let everybody see your comments. And yeah, we'll try to answer as many of the questions live as we can, rather than in the chat if possible. And I should introduce myself. I am Courtney Morano. I work at VMFA and I'm the Manager of Interpretation, which is in the education department. So we're really happy to have you here. So let's go ahead and get started. So Christine, I'm going to ask you just to kind of introduce, tell us a little bit about Wasserhund Brewery and how you got started and what's the story?
Sure. So first, it's Wasserhund,
Wasserhund,
which is
yes.
Wasserhund. So the W is a V sound. It's German for water dog. So my husband, the handsome man next to me in this picture, is the other owner. His name is Ernst, and he is actually the head brewer for the brewery. So in 2012, we actually went to Oktoberfest in Munich, Germany, and we absolutely fell in love with German styles, German beers, the culture of Germany, drinking in Germany. I mean, if you've ever been to huge beer tents, it's lots of food, it's a fun atmosphere. You're meeting people from all over the world that are all just excited to be in a place where they can be social. And we just fell in love with that. So when we went back to the United States, we were living in Northern Virginia. My husband was working at the naval shipyards in DC at naval reactors, and I was working at Micron Technologies doing semiconductor manufacturing. And they were, fun, interesting jobs, but what I really wanted to do was come back to Virginia Beach. And my husband was like, well, when we go back to Virginia Beach, I would really like to start my own business. So what was that business going to be? We had gotten into home brewing a couple years earlier, and he was like perfecting his beers. We had a bunch of neighborhood parties all the time where we would, showcase his homebrew beers. So, we're the popular people. It was fine. But we really enjoyed the process and the community that came with beer. So Aaron actually ended up writing a 40-page business plan that basically laid out from start to finish what the brewery would look like, what every financial piece of it would be, who our competitors were, just a huge analysis of what a brewery could be in Virginia Beach. And at that point, we would be, I think when we opened, we were like brewery number 5. So like there was nothing there at the time. So I was like, okay, fine, let's do it. And we started kind of executing on this business plan, and the first thing was to get a bank and find a space. And so we visited Virginia Beach, and I was actually 7 months pregnant at the time. And so I'm, huge, and we're walking through these spaces looking for breweries, and we ended up actually randomly visiting this space next to Conti's Bike Shop in Virginia Beach, and was like, I think this is it. I think this is the spot. And we fell in love with the idea of being next to a bike shop. We fell in love with the hilltop area of Virginia Beach, which is where we're located. We just really felt like we could open what we wanted there. So at the same time that we found a spot, a bank actually was like, hey, actually we will help you. Here's a new business loan, and you guys can actually get started. And so what was started as, let's see if we can do it, became, well, now we are signed a lease and we have a loan, so we kind of have to do it kind of thing. And so we opened our doors in August of 2015. We had our first child in February of 2015. We moved in May of 2015 to Virginia Beach, and we opened in August of 2015. So 2015 was a huge year for our family and for the business, and we will be celebrating our 6th anniversary this August. So
wow, that was a lot to work into 1 year.
Yes, yeah. We always say that for our family, everything we do, it has to be a big production. We've had 3 kids, so
oh my gosh,
we just had our 3rd kid on January 1st of 2020. She came at 1 a.m. on January 1st. So nothing that we do is ever small. Like, we can't just have a baby. We were the first baby in Virginia Beach with Centera, so there's this huge news thing. Our second child came on the first day we canned. With every brewery opening, it's been a whole thing. So it's a fun little, stressful life we live. It's great.
Yeah, well, definitely keeps you on your toes. Okay, so you have 3 human children. Now tell us a little bit about your furry friends, since we're going to be talking about dogs tonight. And your beer is dog inspired, obviously.
Dog inspired. So I mentioned the German aspect. We love German beers. So our main beers are all German. The 3 beers you're tasting tonight are all German beers. And we also love our dogs. They were, of course, our first babies. And so we actually were kicking around German names, and we couldn't really figure out what we wanted to name our brewery. It had to be perfect. We were walking the dogs on a trail in Northern Virginia, and they were playing in the river. And we were like, oh, they're such water dogs. And Aaron was like, I wonder what water dog is in German. And we looked it up, and it was Wasserhund, and we were like, Wasserhund Brewing Company. We kind of like that, like beach theme, like with German, it's kind of all rolled in. And so Wasserhund, the name came to be. And in that, we kind of named it after the dogs. So we ended up working in Ernst as being part of the brewery with his like German Shepherd regalness. And it's kind of exploded from there. We knew how much people love dogs, but I think we took for granted how much people like their dogs. And so, I mean, now every single dog or every single beer that we do, if we can it, it's got a dog on it. It has a dog themed name. Like, we throw dog parties once a month where it's like an unleashed area that we put together behind the brewery. We have dog beer and dog treats and dog vendors. And I mean, it's really fun, actually. It's turned into kind of like a second part of the brewery, a second image that we've put together. It's nice. We love it. We love dogs.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. So you have Hooper on the left, and then Ernst, your sort of almost your spokes dog or model, your model on the.
Yeah. So he's named after the German scientist that discovered frequency.
Oh wow! Getting intellectual.
Yeah.
And then let's not forget, we won't forget Aaron, who you mentioned earlier, your handsome husband there in the middle.
Yes.
If you could maybe just talk a little bit about the process or the brewing process, and a little bit more about your big picture of the beers in general, or the brewery.
Yeah, so this is like a nice professional photography of our current brew house in Virginia Beach. It's a 15-barrel brew house. So if you ever been to like a college keg party, those big kegs are your half barrel kegs. So each batch that we brew is 15 barrels, and a half barrel is 15 and a half gallons. So if you can kind of think about it in that sense. Sorry, I saw Susan mention the German Shepherds on the White House. Yeah, so we've been talking about it, and I think you might see a little bit of some of Biden's little German Shepherds show up at some point. Can't miss out on the dogs, right? The dog opportunities are always there, and we like to capitalize on them. So I think you should follow us on Facebook and Instagram and watch for those.
That's a great question, yeah.
But as far as the brewery goes, so I mean, the brewing process in general, it can be simplified in the sense that you're taking grain that has been dried, you're cracking it open, you're exposing the insides of it, and you're extracting the sugars and the proteins from the grain. Once you do that, you have like a sugar water, which we call wort. And with that wort, we boil it and we add hops. And those hops are flavoring hops. They can be aroma hops. They can be bittering hops, basically to offset the sweetness of a beer. And then we can add adjuncts to it. So if we have a fruited beer, we might add fruit to it. We can add it in the boil. We can add it in the fermenter. But once we have all those sugars and proteins, and we've boiled it and we've added the hops, we cool it down and we add yeast, and the yeast ends up going in and it eats the sugars that we extracted from the grains, and it actually produces CO2 and alcohol. And so we let the yeast do its thing and we end up with a finished beer product. And along that process, I mean, there are so many different particulars to beer processes. Lagers are fermented at certain temperatures. Ales are fermented at different temperatures. You can do your brewing process. You extract different proteins and enzymes, or proteins and sugars at different temperatures. So the whole thing is very technical. It's almost like, you know, a chef. He goes into a restaurant and he is, you know, a chef at a seafood restaurant. So he's going to cook his salmon differently than he's going to cook his calamari. And that's kind of how beer is. Like, depending on what you're looking at and what styles you're looking for, you're going to make that differently and you're going to approach it differently. And it's really fun. If you come by the brewery and the brewers are there, they're usually there during the day, Monday through Friday. We'd be happy to show you around and kind of talk you through the process. But there's so much to talk about. We could do an entire hour-long lecture just on beer brewing. So that's my simplified answer.
No, that's great. Well, there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, it's very scientific, obviously, too.
Yeah, a lot more scientific than I think people think it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look at. So this is an image of your amazing indoor space that you have. And you also, I don't know if there's anything you want to say about your building, but you also have an outdoor space as well. Have you been able to maintain that through COVID, or what's your business been like during COVID?
Yeah, COVID, I mean, I think with every business in COVID, in March of 2020, no one knew what the next year or the next, I mean, at this point, we're getting into, you know, over a year. Was going to bring, and we really took it in stride. We have most of our employees stayed. They either took a break through 2020 until they felt comfortable to come back, or they kept working the entire time, and we kept employing them as much as we possibly could. So we really have grown over this past year as far as a family aspect goes. Business-wise, you know, when it's takeout and delivery only, it was horrible. Well, not horrible. We had a huge support from the community, but it definitely took a dive. But as we were able to open back up and do different things, we met every order that the governor gave us and did it. So, you know, when we could do outside dining, we did outside dining. When we could do inside dining 6 feet apart, we did inside dining 6 feet apart. Yesterday, we were allowed to start bar seating, so we did bar seating. You know, so we've done every single thing that we've been allowed to do as quickly and efficiently and as safely as we possibly could. And in truth, like, we have really gained, I think, a good customer base from it, because they know that we're trying to be responsible, but they also have really enjoyed, like, getting to know us on a more personal level because there haven't been as many people there. You know, our employees have been the same for the past 2 years, and they've really gotten to know them, and it's become what we call Vassar family, which is really cool. We like it.
That's great. That's great. And you definitely have a family in the community as well. I'm excited to get to go there. It looks like your space is amazing.
Yes.
All right.
Really
Well,
we're dog friendly on the patio. We don't allow dogs inside because we have food, so the health department won't let us.
code, yeah.
We've done a lot to increase our outdoor patio space so that we have a lot of space for customers that bring their dogs.
That's great. Well, let's talk a little bit more specifically about the beer that we are tasting now, the Purebred Pilsner. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this? It's good.
Yes. So one thing that I said was like we really love German beers. So I mean, a Pilsner is the ultimate German beer of German beers. Pilsners are from Europe, basically. There's a couple of different countries that create them. You have like the Czech Pilsner, the German Pilsner. We of course make a German style Pilsner. We use malt and hops that we actually import from Germany for this beer, and we make it to Reinheitsgebot, of course. It pours this beautiful like yellow clear, which I always like pouring this beer because I think it's a really pretty beer. And then when you smell it, you don't get like a huge like amount of aroma, but it's like a little bit of sweetness, and like you get kind of the malt from it. And then when you taste it, take a sip. You get like a nice, good like malt flavor, and then you get a little bit of bitterness from the hops. The hops that we use are Hallertau Mittelfrau hops, and it's from the Hallertau region in Germany, and it gives kind of that spiciness to the beer, if you can call it that. But it gives you a little bit of dryness, a little bit of crispness, and then a little bit of that spice. And kind of makes the Pilsner like the ultimate beer in general. Like if you're looking at, you know, your Budweisers, your Coors Lights, they're all like Pilsner inspired beers with some rice in them to make them a little bit sweeter. But this is the beer that pairs with, you know, all of your barbecues and your, you know, lawn mowing and all that stuff. Because it's light, it's easy to drink. It keeps your mouth wet, but also dry in the sense that you want to keep drinking it. So it's, in my opinion, like the way that you can kind of introduce people to craft beer is to start with something light and easy to drink, and a Pilsner is all of that.
That's great. Well, it was a great first beer for us to start with tonight then. That's great. Sounds like a great summer beer too then. Yeah.
It is. German beers in general are really good summer beers, which I find interesting because their winters are so horrible. You'd think they would have, I mean, they have like, you know, dark, heavy, like Bock beers, but they don't have like, they don't do a bunch of stouts and things like American breweries do. So I find it interesting that their beers are very summer leaning.
Very light. Yeah, that's great. All right, well, we're gonna kind of move into an art moment, and this is the work of art that we chose to advertise this program. So kind of playing off this purebred theme, this is an ancient Roman bronze. So it's very small. It's only about this big, and it's in our Greek and Roman galleries. It's a statuette of what is called a Malosian hound. So a type of dog that is really no longer in existence. So there's, as with anything that's 2,000 years old, you know, there's a lot of controversy or thoughts about, you know, what kind of dog was this? What are its ancestors? You know, who are its descendants in terms of dogs? Where did it come from? All of those things. But so I'm going to speak in some generalities, but it was probably a dog used for guarding, maybe herding, maybe even war, dogs of war. It came from an area, it's called a Malosian hound because it came from an area in sort of what is now between northern Greece and Albania, but an area called Malosia, named after one of the kings, Malosus, who may have been the grandson of Achilles, the famous Greek hero from the Trojan War, or if you've seen the movie Troy, Brad Pitt's character. It's a little old, but so I think this is where this dog originated, or at least where it takes its name from. And again, they're probably used for herding, or for being guard dogs. And there's a famous image, if you've been to the British sporting art, if you look up Molosian Hound or a Molliser dog, you might come across this sculpture. It's called the Jennings dog, and it's a roughly life-size marble sculpture. It's a Roman copy of what would have been a Greek bronze original, but it's like I said, it's in the British Museum and is thought to represent one of these dogs. In terms of what this object is, so our little bronze, we think that it would have been on a box of some sort, maybe guarding the top of this little box, or maybe a fitting for a chariot, like a decorative ceremonial chariot. So it would have served a function as really a sort of decoration. But I think that says something about Roman culture, that they would want to put a dog like this, on maybe a household object, or maybe on a ceremonial chariot, that these dogs had some importance to them. So it's thought that these hounds were potentially, as time went on, between the Molosian hounds and the Tibetan mastiffs, that these sort of became the ancestors to the modern mastiffs, like the English mastiffs, the Neapolitan mastiffs, other dogs as well, but Saint Bernards. I just can barely handle this picture of this Neapolitan mastiff. I mean, my daughter and I went down a rabbit hole of looking at images or videos rather, this whole genre of videos of mastiffs in particular, in slow motion, shaking or running, because all of their jowls and their skin is shaking. So anyway, sorry, side note. But thinking about these dogs and their purpose, I mean, obviously their size is one thing, right? So they were really praised in antiquity for their size, not necessarily their speed. I mean, this was not going to necessarily be a dog that was going to do running and hunting and things like that. It was probably a guard dog. So there's a long history of dogs being used for guarding. And one of sort of the most famous examples, this is not in our collection, this is from Pompeii, but beware of the dog. So in Latin at the bottom, it says cave canem. So beware of the dog. So this is sort of a typical image that you might see when you think of guard dogs, and it sort of points to their role in this way. So we think that these dogs were really used to guard farms, considering a lot of ancient Rome and ancient Roman times, 1st, 2nd century, when the sculpture was made, it was a huge agrarian culture. So tons of farmland. There were animals that needed to be guarded, whether that was sheep or cattle or what, they needed a guard dog to protect the farm. So it's one thought that these dogs played that role. There's some discrepancy over what they might have looked like, but some of the ancient authors describe that they were supposed to be big, have these sort of a thick neck, and be able to fend off, animals like wolves that would be interested in attacking the other animals that might live on the farm. But they also needed to not have the taste for the farm animals themselves. So one ancient source tells us that they may have been fed a vegetarian diet. I know my dogs would not be thrilled with being fed a vegetarian diet, but that was one thing that they said about these dogs. They needed to eat a vegetarian diet. So that's just one type of dog. So a little bit tonight, I'll talk about kind of different roles dog fulfilled. So thinking about guard dogs and protection is important, but there were also dogs that were more companion animals. So this is an image of on one of our Greek vases of this little dog, very clearly a different type of dog than the Molosian hound, a smaller, thinner dog. Maybe this was a sight hound or a dog that is helping with hunting, but also a traveling companion. The gentleman on horseback we know is traveling. I mean, obviously he's on a horse, so he's in motion, but he's probably going a longer distance. His hat and the cloak that he wears indicate that that he's sort of on the road for a while. And so maybe this was his favorite companion, I like to think about. So it's just interesting to make that connection between purebreds and what this dog is, sort of the Malosian hounds. Are they ancestors to dogs that are still in existence today? And thinking about German shepherds, I mean, they are guard dogs, right?
Yeah.
How is Hertz? Is Hertz a good guard dog?
He is actually. We can't like have anyone that we don't know like help us take care of him, because if they walk in the house, he's like in their face. And he's a big dog. He's over 100 pounds, and his head is like, I feel like 25 of those pounds. I mean, not really, but
Yeah.
he's a big dog. I would say with German Shepherds, and I think most German Shepherd owners would agree with this, is like they love their owners and will do anything for their owners. So it's just like instinctual protection, because if they feel threatened, like their owner or their family might be threatened in any way, a German Shepherd like instinctually gets defensive, which is it's interesting watching different dogs in different situations.
Yeah, it is interesting. And thinking about the breeding that goes into creating those characteristics.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. German Shepherds have been used across the ages for all sorts of different things, good and bad, as far as just for their loyalty purposes, their defensive purposes. I mean, they're big dogs with big jaws, and they can do a lot of damage.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, we're gonna crack into our second beer. Speaking of German Shepherds, we have the German Schepperweisen. Yes.
Beautiful. I have to chug this beer.
Oh no!
Not pour the whole thing. I hope everyone has separate glasses.
I was afraid I wouldn't be able to drink the entire first one, but fear not, tonight they will all get drank. All right, so tell us a little bit about the Schepperweisen. Very clever name, by the way.
Yeah, so this is actually, the German Schepperweisen is actually our like mainstay main beer. I mean, Hefeweizens in general are a super well-known, I mean, Pilsners are as well, but Hefeweizens are a very well-known group of beers, both by name and by taste. They're very distinct. And people are on two, I was talking to my neighbor today about this, people are on two fields. They either love Hefeweizens or they hate Hefeweizens. There's not really many people that are like in the middle of like, I mean, I would drink one if I was offered one. They're like, no, yes. And that's because they're super distinct in flavor. Hefeweizens are a German wheat beer, and so they have like a nice cloudiness and a nice darker. So like if you compare the two between Pilsner and Hefeweizen, you'll notice that it's like a little bit, and I only poured a little bit because I'm not trying to like chug 3 beers, but it's a little bit darker than your Pilsner color, and it's going to be a little bit cloudier. If you have your can, I usually, and I didn't of course this time, but I usually like to Hefeweizens upside down before I open them, because yeast will settle down at the bottom, and that's just very typical of Hefeweizens, and it's why they're cloudy, because they have a yeast that suspends in here, and it's very difficult for brewers without filtering it to get it out. And Hefeweizens are typically cloudy, so you don't want to filter it and make it clear, because then it's not to style, and that yeast does give flavor to the beer. So as you're looking at it, it should be a little bit cloudy. It should be a little bit darker than your Pilsner. Hefeweizens are really cool, and it's one of my favorite styles of beer, because it has very particular yeast that you're allowed to use for making a Hefeweizen style beer. And that is a Hefeweizen yeast. I mean, I keep saying the word, but it is a yeast that as it ferments, it actually releases banana and clove flavors. So Hefeweizens are known for their banana flavors and their clove flavors, and you can kind of pick a yeast that gives more banana flavor or more clove flavor. You can ferment at different temperatures that will give you less or more. So we have kind of, in my opinion, perfected our recipe to give us the best of Hefeweizen, and I think we do a really, really great job with it. This beer is at Busch Gardens. This beer is at the Amphitheater in Virginia Beach. This beer is at every grocery store in Hampton Roads. You can find it at the Total Wines in Richmond, Capital Ale House in Richmond. This is like our signature, I would say, like signature beer. It's not only perfectly German in style, but it has a lot of really great flavors. If you like Blue Moons, those are like kind of an orangier, zestier version of a German Hefeweizen. But I always tell people, I'm like, a banana flavor that you're tasting isn't from like banana extract or like added banana flavors. Like that is a natural process that as the yeast ferments at a particular temperature, it actually releases that ester into the beer. So you have to be careful too, because Hefeweizen yeast is super, like they talk about bacterial infections in beer, and Hefeweizen yeast is actually really close to that. So we brew a lot of Hefeweizen, and so my husband is obsessed with cleaning the tanks and making sure the ports are clean, because if Hefeweizen yeast gets loose in your brewery, it can like make all of your beers taste like banana, and you're like, why does this have this slight banana flavor? And you're like, oh crap. So it's a really interesting style of beer. It's a very particular style, and I think that if you like Hefeweizens, this kind of meets all of those categories. It gives you that like you can smell the banana, and then you can get it in the tasting, and then that malt sweetness kind of brings it all together. And if you don't agree, you know, leave it in the comments after I'm gone. But I don't want to hear it. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Tell us what you think. I mean, it's complex, I would say. I mean, it's got a lot of different flavors. I mean, I think your label describes it really well.
Yeah, Hefeweizens in general are a very complex beer. I mean, they have a particular malt backbone where you're like looking at, you have to have the sweetness, but it can be too sweet. So, and you have to have a little bit of caramel flavor and a little bit of color to it. And that's kind of like what I was talking about with being a chef. Like, as brewers create recipes, they're looking at all of these different malts and all of these different things that they can have available, and they use those malt bills and those, you know, color adjunct or color flavor profiles to create a particular style. And so it's very interesting. William just asked, do you add fruit to Hefeweizen? So we don't add any fruit to our Hefeweizen. Our Hefeweizen is all Reinheitsgebot, malts, yeast, water, hops. But there are other breweries that do add fruit to their Hefeweizen, but it is not a true Hefeweizen. It would say on the label that it's a fruited Hefeweizen. So
can you explain that's like a German purity sort of law, or it was a law or something, the Reinheitsgebot? I think that's really interesting.
I should know a lot more, and I have a shirt that tells me when it was made. Maybe someone on the panel, or maybe someone as attendee actually knows. But Germany initially had what they installed as the Reinheitsgebot, and that was because when they were going through a bunch of poverty, and like people didn't have enough to eat, they were using malt to make beer rather than using malt to make bread. And or using wheat. I'm sorry, I don't off the top of my head, I can't remember the full story, but they were using what they should have used to make bread to make beer. And so Reinheitsgebot was basically like a way that Germany said, this is 1516 is what everyone's saying. This is a way to cut down on that. You can now only make beer with these 4 ingredients, or well, at that time, these 3 ingredients, because they didn't know about like hops and stuff like that. But we are only allowing you to use that. So it's just an old German law that basically says, like, you're not going to add, you know, we make an Oreo beer, or we add Oreos to our beer. You're not going to add Oreos and call it a German beer. That's just not going to happen. So we follow that with our German beers as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, I love that y'all stay true to that. I think that's really great. Very authentic.
Yes, and if I get my husband up here, he will dive into that. So if we have time at the end, I can text him and be like, come up and tell us about Reinheit's canoe.
I think you did a nice job. Great.
You can Google it. Google's there for a reason, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's I believe that's what Kristen and I did to come up with that year. All right. Well, speaking of German, just we want to take another look at a work of art. This is by Ernst Ludwig Kirschner. And he's actually really well represented in our collection at VMFA. But I wanted to take a look at, so we kind of had this working dog with our last piece. So thinking about dogs can also be seen as accessories or indicators of status, and then symbols of things like fidelity. Like I said, this is a work by Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, and he was born in 1880, and he is one of the sort of earliest proponents of a style that became called German Expressionism. But in turn, so what he's captured here, he's captured what I would consider at the time, so it's 1912, this painting was done. He's captured a very fashionable woman probably in Berlin or in one of the cities in Germany, a very fashionable woman that has, she's got a little lap dog here. So probably some indication that this dog is part of that air of what makes her fashionable. And that's not unusual. I know this image is a little dated, but if we think about, celebrities today, I mean, many celebrities don't always just have the purse dog, but, it's a frequent occurrence to see sort of this dog as an accessory. So, I think that's been similar throughout history. They indicate people's status and sort of wealth sometimes, kind of where you come from as well. But just a little bit more about Kirchner and German Expressionism. He was originally trained as an architect, but became really interested more in painting and printmaking. And so if you think about this time period too, this is Germany in the teens, so right before World War I, and then he continued to work into the 20s and 30s. And that's a really contentious time period. So you've got obviously World War I, you've got the rise of the Nazis. And so it's kind of a crazy time politically, but then you also have some of these German cities that are becoming really, really fashionable places to be, really, getting into the arts and the culture. And he was part of a movement, German Expressionism, but before that, a movement called Die Brücke. And my German is nicht so gut, is not so good, but a movement called The Bridge. And he and some fellow artists were really interested in looking back to older forms of art, older, specifically German forms of art, particularly printmaking. So this is an image of Kirchner in the middle here, but woodblock printing or woodcuts as a way to think about kind of simplified forms, but also things that could show a little bit more spontaneity. They were sort of fighting against, it always seems like artists are fighting against the establishment. And this was no different. So they're fighting against what they considered highly academic art. So what you would consider very, traditional paintings with very symmetrical, very balanced compositions, less abstracted forms. So they were sort of working against that and wanted something that sort of had this more expressionist style. So these are just a sample of a couple of woodblock prints. The one on the right is actually by Kirchner. It's actually one with a cat. I wanted to slip a cat in here. And then the one on the left is by another German expressionist artist who was actually really influenced by Kirchner, but another dog image there. And this is just some more images of the type of work that he did and the types of scenes that he might capture. So streetwalkers on the left. So again, just capturing things that are going on, in this time in particularly Berlin in some cases. And this is a woman on the right, which I thought was interesting when I found this image online of what his studio might have looked like. So apparently he ran this very bohemian studio, and he was very influenced by African art and other types of art, and had this sort of studio as a place where people would come and meet, and everything was sort of drenched in fabrics and art from different places, although he never really left Germany. So he was interested in, arts from all over. And I just thought it was interesting to see, it looks to me like this is an image of his wife with him in the photograph. And then, I don't know, it looks a lot like his wife in this painting that we have on the left, and the sculpture that is shown in the studio image looks very similar to the sculpture. So I love when you can kind of make those connections in thinking about that. But he did, unfortunately, his life was not without tragedy. He did suffer from depression and was institutionalized sometimes. And again, he's living at this sort of crazy political time. And with the rise of the Nazis in the 1930s, artists like himself were considered what they called degenerate. So they were considered to be degenerates themselves, and their art was considered degenerate. And so many of his works of art were actually seized by the Nazis. They were pulled out of collections, private and public institutions. I think over 600 of Kirchner's works themselves were actually pulled out of collections and stuff. So that did cause him to be quite depressed, as one can imagine. But I wanted to look at this a little bit more in terms of, what he was capped at that time. Yes, and Kristen is reminding me, there was a degenerate art exhibition in 1937. So they actually put on a show of, the Nazis put on a show of degenerate art. Sort of your last ditch effort, I guess, to see all of these things in one place. And Kirchner's work was a part of that exhibition. But also just making this statement again, that dogs have been seen as items of fashion and success. And someone is reminding us, yes, thank you so much. We do have a great German Expressionist permanent collection installation actually right off the atrium. So please go and check that out, because it's they've done an amazing job. We actually have a really great story on our website about the collectors, Ludwig and Rosie Fischer. So there's a great story. You can learn more about the collectors who were collecting this, because they were experiencing some of the same things that Kirchner was experiencing. They were collecting this art sort of in real time at the time that this art is being done. And so they faced some of the same, issues, and they were also Jewish. So thinking about getting out of Germany, before Hitler could do what he did. So on that note, I have one more just image I just wanted to show, because we have so many representations of dogs, and it's, I didn't want to be without talking about dogs and being faithful. I mean, I sort of showed it with a Greek vase, but this is a really large painting in our Dutch and Flemish galleries of a dog that sort of, represents fidelity. So you've got probably the married couple on the right here, kind of in their fancy garb, and everything within this painting is symbolic. You've got somebody pouring water out in a very measured way. So thinking about married life as being measured and balanced, and the musicians sort of keeping time, and again, just everything just sort of being balanced and measured, and the dog again with fidelity and faithfulness, right? So that's a moral implication there. And then that's in contrast to what's going on the left side of the painting. You've got these people brawling in the street. So there's sort of the stark contrast between sort of what should be and then what sometimes is. And that chained monkey is another indication of something you don't want to be involved in. It's sort of unchained lasciviousness is not good. So you gotta chain that up. All right. So speaking of unleashed, that's a little we're not going to unleash the monkey, but you have a great goes called Unleashed.
Wow. Yeah, so tell us about this one. So this is where you do add some fruit, right? So you have
so we add the fruit to this one. This is probably like my go-to beer in the brewery as far as like, hey, I'm just gonna have a quick beer. I'm gonna have like a beer with my lunch or a beer. Sorry, we don't do that.
beer, you know, like mowing the lawn, if I don't want a Pilsner. This beer, it was created by Aaron, my husband, and really he designed it to kind of fill a niche in the craft beer industry, and that is that sours are becoming like a new thing. Well, Germany actually has kind of a not as well known sour called the Goza, and this is his version of that. So ours is actually a kettled sour Goza, which means that he brews it one day, he lets it sour in the brew kettle for overnight. He gets it to a certain pH and then he boils it. So there's no active bacteria. So some of your sours that you have, there's active bacteria in your sour. So the longer you let it sit at room temperature in the can or in the bottle, it's constantly getting more sour if it hasn't been filtered out. But his is a kettle sour, which means that when he boils it, all of that bacteria gets killed. And when he cools it, he pitches a different yeast to create the alcohol. So this is like a 2 yeast beer. But it pours this really great color, and it's I love it because I think it's really pretty. And when it's in distribution and it's on tap, I think that restaurants really have a like key indicator because like look at that color, like it's so pretty, it's pink, and it's fun. And I think that there's like good like, hey, what's the beer that like they just poured? And we also started our like beer can redesign with this beer, which is why you see this can being that color, because we wanted to kind of match the insides to the beer can design on the outside. So that label is pink because it's pink. And so Gozas are a German art ale. I don't call them sours because I don't believe that they're super sour. And so I think sour turns a lot of people off. But like on the label, it says refreshingly or lightly tart and refreshingly fruity. I believe that description to be very true. So if you want to smell it, you can actually smell like the tartness to it. And so it kind of prepares, I think this beer is really important to smell before you drink because it kind of prepares your tongue for the tartness, and it makes it like tingle a little bit on the sides, which I find like super fun. Like, oh. And then when you try it, you get like the tartness over your tongue. Sorry, for me, it takes like 2 sips to kind of get the full, but you get the tartness over your tongue and then the boysenberry fruit at the end. So boysenberry is actually kind of, it's a fruit from California, and it's a mixture of like blackberry and raspberry flavor is kind of like the flavor behind it, but it is its own fruit. And we buy it from a company called Oregon Fruit, and it comes in and we pitch it into our beer after it's in the fermenter, and it ferments with the boysenberry in there. So it's actually eating any sugars that are available for the yeast to eat. It does eat. So like a lot of people talk about, you know, fruited beers being explosive in the can. Well, this beer is not, because we do allow the fruit to ferment. So you don't get the overly sweet part of the fruit. What you're getting is that tartness, and then you're getting the fruity flavor, which I really like. Like, I just think it's a really fun, I keep saying like it's super fun. I just really like this beer for like, it's 5% alcohol. So it's not like overly alcoholic for like a craft beer. A lot of craft breweries like to, you know, make beers that you can only drink 1 or 2 of them before you're like, oh God, like I have to eat something. But it's 5%. So it's the same as like your Trulies and your other like hard seltzers. And then it's also got a little bit of tartness, a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of dryness to just make it like an easy drinking beer. And I like to give this beer to people that aren't necessarily beer fans, but they are hard seltzer fans, because I'm like, this beer kind of hits that like dry, fruity part that some of those hard seltzers kind of are going after. So
Good transition maybe for people who, yeah.
It's a fun beer.
Yeah, awesome. What made you choose Boysenberry?
So boysenberry was the fruit we chose because it was not knowing at the time, it's actually a hard fruit to find because it's only from California. So I don't know if we would choose it knowing what we know now, but we chose it because it's not overly tart and not overly sweet.
Okay.
So it's like a really good fruit for like that middle person that's looking for like, because when you fruit things with raspberry, you get a lot of tartness. And a lot of like that puckering, which we didn't want necessarily for a beer that we were going to try and like release to the masses in general.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, speaking of fun, I think this next work of art really goes with that idea of fun, and I think this is sort of a beloved piece at VMFA. It also kind of goes with Unleashed as well.
Yeah.
It's by artist Roy Deforest. It was done in 1977. He was born in 1930. He did pass away, I think, about 10 years ago or so. But it's called Out West, and Roy Deforest is known for including dogs in almost every work of art that he does. So dogs were a constant subject matter for him, among other animals. So he grew up on a farm in Nebraska, and then he did move around a little bit as a child, but farms were always part of his, his childhood memories and his life. So he's sort of frequently referencing, the importance of that and his childhood memories. He was part of an art movement called funk art, F-U-N-K, or California funk. He sometimes called it nut art, which is, related, or sometimes something that he preferred to call it. And it was really about, sort of ideas of humor. So including humor in it, which is one reason that I love this work of art. It doesn't sort of take itself too seriously. It's just sort of about fun. This was an art movement that was sort of confined to California, particularly Northern California. But kind of like the Kirchner, I mean, they're sort of going against the establishment. So working in the 60s and into the 70s, they're sort of moving against abstract expressionist art and thinking a little bit more about bringing representation back in. So putting back in recognizable features or figures, although a little bit fantastic. So the funk movement is known for these sort of fantastic scenes that kind of almost mirror an alternate reality, but again are just kind of fun and usually full of color and characters. Again, not taking itself too seriously. Roy Deforest wasn't really into perfect symmetry or bilateral symmetry. So you're not going to find his works of arts being perfectly balanced. It's sort of about characters popping up. He really liked the idea of process. So thinking about how works of art got made. And these little dots pop up in a lot of his work of art. And he's been known to sort of say, like, sometimes people would think of something they wanted to paint and then figure out how to make that happen. But he would really think about the paint and what the paint would sort of direct him to make and what would come out of that. So a little bit of a reverse project or process rather. But it's just fun. And, when you look up Roy Deforest online, I mean, you not only see all of his amazing images populated with these figures, but also just so many images of him with dogs. So I think this may be some of the dog, at least the dog on the top there might be this guy here, possibly. But again, just a vibrantly colored, sort of fun, fantastic world. And I think funk or funky is a good way to describe it. They took that name really from jazz. It was a term used to describe jazz at the time. So thinking about its relationship to jazz and sort of improv and just kind of a quirkiness that can be applied to it. Somebody says they have a jigsaw puzzle of this painting, which came from the gift shop. Absolutely. Yeah, this is an image that we love to do things with. It's kind of a fan favorite. I know it was my favorite when I was very young coming into the museum. This is just an example of some of his other works of art featuring dogs. There was an exhibit a few years ago. I think it was solely about Roy Deforest and his depictions of dogs. So it's definitely one thing that he's known for. All right. Well, I want to be conscientious of our time, and I want to give Christine some time to talk about food, because I know we're probably all getting hungry, and I think it's a good way to talk about what kinds of foods you offer.
I know, I can't believe it's almost 6:30. So we are one of the few breweries that actually offer a full menu at our brewery. Our main food is pizza. We actually, when we got that space that I was talking about, it was an old Italian restaurant, and they left their pizza oven. And the landlord was like, I don't want it. I don't care. You can sell it. You can get rid of it. You can do whatever you want. And we were like, well, we're going to make pizza in it. And so we ended up setting up a pizza kitchen, and we have since, like, I feel like it's morphed into this amazing creation. We use beer in every aspect that we can possibly do. I was telling Courtney and Kristen earlier, like we use beer yeast in our dough. We use beer to make our Italian sausage. We use beer in our bratwurst. We use beer to make our beer cheese and our beer mustard. And so we try to incorporate our beer in pretty much every aspect that we possibly can. And it's really fun, and it's super like interesting. And a lot of people don't realize that we have 12 beers on tap that we all brew in the brewery. That's literally 10 steps from those taps. And then we also make our own pizza, bratwurst, pretzels. We have an awesome potato salad, and it's a really fun atmosphere. So if you haven't been to Wasserhund, you should make the like hour-and-a-half to 2-hour drive, depending on how fast you drive, down to Wasserhund, stay for the night down at a hotel at the oceanfront. Come visit us. It's really fun. Great atmosphere, great food, great beer. Yeah, good times for all.
That's great. I love that you incorporate beer into the food, and you also mentioned that it's, sometimes people ask you for the special pairings, and it's like everything goes with everything, right?
Right. Yeah, we were talking about that. Like it's German beer, and German beer is made to go with food. And so I would say that literally it's just, what kind of beer do you like, and then what kind of pizza do you like?
So you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong. I love that. All right, well, we're going to close out here. We got a couple more things. These are my dogs. That's all. I just wanted to show my dogs because they're my passion. And then just to say, of course, VMFA has tons of images with dogs. So come look around, see what kind of, go on your own little scavenger hunt and see what kind of dogs you can find. But I did want to allow Christine some time to talk. She's got some exciting news.
Yeah, so sorry, I didn't know you were going to end there.
I'm sorry, I have a couple more things after you're done.
we are opening a second location in Greenbrier in Chesapeake, and this is kind of a rendering of it. But we're super excited. We should be opening mid-August of this year. So while COVID did a lot of things, one thing it did for us was realize that we are focused on the German model, which is local breweries for local people. And so we want to kind of emulate that. And we have our Virginia Beach location, and now we're going to have our Chesapeake location. And it's opening in Summit Point in Greenbrier, Chesapeake. And if you're around in August or you come down, you can stop in here. And we're trying to kind of recreate our Virginia Beach location here. It'll have a 5-barrel brew house, so it'll be about a third of the size, but still be all locally made beer. We're still going to bring our pizza and our full menu. So we're really, really excited about this opportunity, and couldn't have done it without our amazing customers. So it's pretty cool.
That's so great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Really, very exciting. All right, being conscientious of time, there is a talk right now. It starts in 1 minute. Artist Raven Costello. So if you can jump off and join that, it's registration is free. You just need to register. So encourage you to do that if you're interested. And then I definitely wanted to make sure that we thank Chase for their sponsorship of this program and presenting this program. And just to give you a heads up for the next program, The one on May 14th will be wine. It says wine TBD. We don't know which winery yet, but we'll get that information out as soon as we can. And then at the end of May, May 28th, will be Reason Beer. But that concludes. Thank you all so much for coming. Christine, thank you so much. It's been so great to work with you, and so impressed by what you do at Wasserhund. I will pronounce it much better now.
Thank you.
All right, I'm just going to let some of the questions roll through, but again, thanks to everybody.
I have no problem hanging out for a few minutes if anyone does have questions. There weren't a lot of questions, so I feel like I'm just super thorough.
You are very thorough. I think that is it. Yeah. So if there are any other questions, you want to stick around for a minute, feel free to pop them in the chat. Otherwise.
And if you think of something later, on our website, there is a contact us form, and that form actually comes to me. So if you do think of a question or you have something that you'd like to say, feel free to contact me through that as well.
That's great.
And thank you guys. Thank VMFA so much for having us. We really appreciate it. And it was super fun. I love your artwork. And next time I'm in Richmond, I'm definitely stopping by to get some of the stone dogs.
Yes, absolutely. We'll do mutual tours. We'll come visit you. You'll come visit us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Let's see. All right. Okay. Well, I'm guessing there might not be any more questions, so we can go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you again, everybody. And all right. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.